Hey there, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andrew Clarke, and in today's video, I want to talk about hybrid picking. Now, hybrid picking is one of those techniques that is typically associated more with country playing, but in this lesson, I want to talk about how hybrid picking can be a benefit no matter what genre of music you play. Now, in the past, there have been plenty of guitar players who have used hybrid picking who are not inside of the country genre, namely Eric Johnson, and there are many others who've used it, but one person who recently has become very popular is Tim Henson from Polyphia, and he uses hybrid picking religiously in their songs. Now, we're not going to be diving into any Polyphia songs here, but I do want to talk about some of the techniques that he uses and that I personally use in my playing, whether I'm playing country or I'm playing pop music or soul or R&B or even rock, and I want to show you how you can start using those techniques in your own playing. So if you don't know exactly what hybrid picking is, basically the idea is you use your pick in a very standard way between your first finger and your thumb, and then your remaining fingers, instead of them just sitting around doing nothing as you play and basically being used as maybe a counterweight as you play, you actually are going to use them to finger pick as well. So you essentially have your pick as pick number 1, and then you have 2, 3, and 4. And the cool thing about this is you're not forced to choose between, okay, do I want to use a pick for this particular segment, or do I want to put the pick down and use my fingers? Instead, you'll always have your pick on hand, but you'll always be able to access and use your fingers at the exact same time. Now, in many ways, playing guitar is about control and efficiency. So basically, when you are picking and you need to do certain things like skip a string, so let's say you pick something on the A string, and then you also right after that have to pick something on the B string, well, it's quite hard to be able to play down here. You can see my hand has to jump all the way up there. And obviously this isn't a complicated thing. This is just to kind of illustrate. But instead, what I could do is just go set up. And the idea is that hybrid picking is not only going to allow you to access some very cool new sounds in your playing, but it's also going to help you to improve your efficiency and make some things that were maybe a little bit more challenging a little bit easier to play. Okay, so I want to start things off with just a very basic hybrid picking technique, kind of how to get into this technique if it is your first time. And the first question I want to answer just has to do with nails. Should you have long nails or should you keep your nails short? Now, I'm somebody who keeps their nails very short. I'm not a nail biter, so some of my nail does come up from my finger. Here, I'll put it into the camera so you can see if it will focus. There you go. So you can see my fingernails typically look like that. So they're cut short, but they're not super short. So what that means is when I put my fingers on the strings, it's mostly on the fleshy part of my finger, but it's also just touching the end of my nail. So long nails, unfortunately for me, they don't really work. My nails are a little bit too brittle. I find myself breaking them. So if you want to have long nails, you can. But typically for hybrid picking specifically, short nails are going to be best. You actually want to be using the fleshy part of your fingers, and this is especially the case for electric guitar as well. Ultimately, the choice is totally up to you, but they are going to offer two very different sounds. Okay, so to start things off with this technique, we're going to keep things super simple. All we're going to do is we're going to incorporate one extra finger. So instead of using all three that we would have available to us, we are only going to use our middle finger. So our second finger is going to be our main hybrid picking finger. And as far as the actual holding of the pick goes, that'll be between your thumb and your first finger. And there's nothing new here. You're not changing how you hold it. However, it sits naturally when you are normally playing. Holding your pick is how the pick is supposed to be. And then all you're going to do is you're going to place your middle finger on another one of the strings that you want to play. So basically we're going to place our pick on one string and we're going to place our middle finger on the other string. Now, typically I like to start off by teaching this using octaves. So we're going to find an octave here. This is a G octave. So we're going to play this note here, and then we've got this note right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to place our pick on the low E string, and our middle finger is going to sit on the D string. So just as if you were finger picking, right? It's the same type of technique, but you're just going to sit them both there, and then you're just going to practice going back and forth. So we're going to play the low note and then the octave up using our middle finger. Then we also want to practice playing those two notes at the exact same time as well. So same thing, we'll use the exact same octave, and instead of going back and forth between the two, we'll just play them at the same time. And then when you feel comfortable with that, you can go back and forth. And take it as slow as you need to. There's absolutely no rush. You're just trying to figure out the technique. Okay, to show you in a little bit more detail, I'm just gonna change the angle here and just move my guitar closer to the camera just so you can see from the side. And all I'm doing is you can see my middle finger sits right here on top of this string, and then the pick is sitting on the low E. And then if I were to play them together, and if I were to go back and forth, okay, so from here, what you want to do is you kind of want to expand out into different gaps. So different ranges. Instead of just playing an octave, you might want to skip another string, right? And then another string. And then another string. And then the idea here is that you'd go between all the different kind of string sets, playing them back and forth and at the same time. And just kind of getting your hand used to the different distances between the strings. And then once you get the hang of that, then you can do it from the A string, so the same idea. And the idea here is just to start building up that muscle memory. I'm somebody who's been hyperpicking for years, and so for me, I don't even have to look back at this hand, where if this hand had no point of reference and you're just kind of trying to pick back like this, you can't tell which string you're gonna pick, right? It's too hard to tell. But if your hand is sitting here and you can feel where one string is, well, then the muscle memory is gonna kick in. You're gonna be able to feel where all the other strings are, right? And so I don't even have to really think about it. Okay, so you really want to spend some time drilling this first and foremost. If you're new to hybrid picking, this is going to be your main exercise for now. So using that middle finger, using your pick at the same time, working on alternating between them, and then working on playing them at the same time with the different string sets. So skipping different amounts of strings. Okay, so the next step from here is to get these other two fingers working. Now, what you can do is you can start with just getting the next finger, so your third finger going, and essentially doing the same thing. So playing a chord shape. So let's say we play this C major chord like this. What you could do is you could work on getting those two fingers in there. But we're gonna jump right to 3. If it's a little bit too much for you, you can use 2. But one thing you don't wanna do is you don't wanna start neglecting your pinky. So a lot of guitar players are notorious for this, both with their fretting hand and with their picking hand, and that is avoiding the use of the pinky. You're really limiting yourself if you do that. Learn how to use your pinky and start early on if you can. So in this case, what I want you to do is I want you to use that pinky. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna place this C major bar chord right here. We're not gonna play the highest string here, but what we're gonna do is we are gonna play every single note in the chord here from those 4 strings. So starting on the A string here. And the technique is totally the same as just using the one finger. All we're doing is we're placing each one on the string. So starting off by placing our pick, it's gonna sit on the A string, then our middle finger is gonna be on the D string, our third finger, our ring finger, is gonna be on the G string, and then our pinky is gonna sit on the B string. All of them are sitting very naturally. Like I said, I'm not contorting my hand at all. Let me show you a different angle here. You can see they're just sitting like this on the guitar right here. Just like that. Nothing here crazy, very simple. And all we're gonna do is we're gonna work on going up and then playing them all at the same time. And then what we can do is we can start doing this with other chords. So any other chords you know. If you just wanna play a regular C major chord, or if you want to play a D major chord. Now what you would do here, and what you need to make sure you're doing, is you're playing the appropriate strings. So with a C major chord, obviously you're playing those 4 middle strings, you're leaving out the low E and the high E, but if you wanted to play a D major chord, for example, well, instead of picking that low A string, you're gonna pick the D string, And then you're going to use your remaining 3 fingers on the highest 3 strings, right? Because a D major chord doesn't have either the A string or the low E string in the chord. So we've got and you can continue to do this with bar chords. And like I said, if that pinky is too hard right away, just do little 3-note parts of the chords. And you might remember in the lessons that I've taught about triads, a lot of the times I was playing those triads by hybrid picking because instead of having to worry about muting those extra strings, I can just be super accurate. Right there, that's coming from a G major chord. I'm just picking 3 notes from a chord and just using those 2 extra fingers to play the triad. Now, it's totally up to you what you're comfortable with, doing the 3-note version, so picking 3 strings hybrid picking, or the 4-note version. I recommend working your way up to that before kind of moving on to any other techniques because you really want to get that pinky working. As far as hand positioning goes and where the hand exactly should be on the guitar, this is going to come down to your own style. If you want to hybrid pick up here closer to the neck, that's fine. If you want to go further back, that's fine. The way that I like to kind of think of it is if I imagine that I'm going to be palm muting, and where my hand is naturally going to sit when I am palm muting like this, well, basically that's going to be the position of my hand when I'm hybrid picking. So palm muting here, I'm basically just rolling my palm back, but the hand is essentially anchored in the same spot. And the idea here is that I can quickly switch back and forth between them. Like I said, a lot of guitar playing stuff is just about efficiency. So minimizing any large movements as much as you can is just gonna make your guitar playing sound smoother, and it's gonna be a lot easier to stay locked in rhythmically. Okay, so that's gonna be it for the actual technique. Now I wanna kind of start talking about the different actual applications in different genres that you can use hybrid picking for. So the first one is very simple, and it's a good one to start with because it only requires you to use 1 finger, and all you're doing for that is you're playing intervals. So we talked about playing a triad, right? So just taking 3 notes from one of your chord shapes and just playing those 3 notes. Technically, you should be trying to play the most important notes, which in most cases are the root, the major or minor third, and the 5th. These notes are essentially the core of every basic chord. So when you're playing triads, you're just playing those 3 notes. But what we're gonna do here is we're only gonna play intervals. So instead of playing 3 notes, we're only gonna play 2 notes. And that's basically gonna involve playing a root and an interval. Now, when you were learning how to do hybrid picking at the start, we were playing octaves, right? And that is an interval. So when you play this, that right there is just an interval. It's just an octave. That is that interval. But we have other intervals that we can play as well. We have root and major third. So a major third interval. So basically when we play, let's say, a big G major bar chord, there is a G note here, and right up here is the major third in the chord. So what we could do is we could play just those 2 notes right there and basically just have the very bare bones of that chord, but it sounds pretty cool, especially if I were to play the major or minor third, so thirds, throughout all the chords in the key. So if I were to play those, I could go and instead of getting any thwacky noises from trying to mute and play both those notes at the same time, instead, because I can be accurate because of my hybrid picking, all I have to do, I don't even have to worry about these. Technically, I don't even have to mute them because I'm not even going to be worried about accidentally hitting them with my pick, right? And just so you know, it's basically for us to go through the scale. If we're starting on a G major chord, we can go G major, and this is A minor, so A and then A minor third, B minor, B and A minor third. Then we can keep going. We've got C and A major third, D and a major third, E and a minor third, F sharp and A minor third, and then we get back to G and A major third. And there's some really cool applications of playing intervals like this. It doesn't have to be the third either. You can play fifths, which are essentially power chords. Now, obviously you can pick those. You could also do something like sixths as well if you wanted to, so something like this. And there are some great applications of this, just playing basically the root and the interval of a chord. Even though it sounds very bare bones, in the context of music or a song, it can sound really cool, especially with like some effects and some reverb and stuff. But a really popular example of this, if you recognize this song, is Hold Back the River by James Bay. That right there is just an example of using the root and the major or the minor third. Again, hybrid picking makes playing something like this super easy. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is something I use all the time. If you watch my lessons, you probably see me do this all the time, and it's essentially playing piano-like chords. And the cool thing about a piano is that you press all of the notes at the same time, if you want to. When you play a chord, for example, you're not going ba-da-da. You're playing all three at the same time, right? Well, when you play guitar, when you strum, unless you're strumming super fast, there's always going to be the notes in order. So, right, as I go through. But what I can do with hybrid picking is I can play every single note at the exact same time. Now, something really cool about this is, especially if you're trying to play something that's a little bit on the softer side and you want to stay really tight with the music you're playing along to or the other people in the band, well, what you can do is, instead of feeling like you need to quickly stab at a chord to make it all come through, all the notes come through, or strum lightly like that, well, unfortunately, the notes aren't all going to come through at the exact same time, right? You're still going to hear the pick going through them. What you can do is you can just play all the notes at the same time, right with the rest of the band. So. And this is really hard to do if you are not using hybrid picking. Now, obviously, you can also just finger pick here. So you could put your pick down somewhere and finger pick these chords, essentially the same way. But the problem is you would need to then do something to get your pick back, right? Whether you're tucking your pick away, putting it in your mouth, or just setting it aside, well, if you need your pick for the next part of the song or something, it's not right there for you to use. Where with hybrid picking, it's right there. So I can play. It's just handy to be able to dynamically have the choice there to go back and forth without having to worry about throwing my pick away, going and picking it up, or moving it. Everything's right there. Now, something else you can do here, and I do this a lot, is, again, it's basically a piano-like thing that you can do, and you can roll the chords. So roll all the notes. So instead of playing them all at once, and this isn't something you really have to do. It's more of like a cool stylistic kind of way to add some flavor to your playing. But if you're playing something, and the idea here is to be able to engage all your fingers at the same time, right? To play all the notes at the same time, and then also to be able to play them individually as well. Okay, so for the next application, we're gonna do something that involves string skipping. And essentially we learned this very early on when we were learning this technique, but it's actually used in a more advanced application, especially with people who are soloing or playing very quickly. And basically the idea is, instead of having to worry about jumping your pick up to play a note if you are skipping a string, so instead of having to do something like this and jumping over a string with my pick, instead, I can just use hybrid picking to do the work for me. And again, you'll notice that the actual motion of my hand is much less when I do this. Now, obviously with this application, I'm only just showing you that one example. There's so many ways you can take it from here. And basically all this is the very first technique we learned, because a lot of the time you're only going to be using that one finger. But if you wanted to incorporate string skipping with double stops, you could do that too. You could incorporate your other fingers. Like I said, there's so many different ways you could take it. The idea is just unlocking a new set of tools. So instead of being limited by just your pick, well, now you've got these extra fingers where if it makes sense, instead of having to worry about doing a big motion, you can do a much smaller motion and just use that extra finger. Now, the most obvious application of hybrid picking, I think, is to play country licks. And there's a bunch of reasons why it's so popular in country, but one of the main ones is because you can get a really cool popping sound. So if I go onto my back pickup like this, and basically all you're doing differently here with your hybrid picking is, instead of being nice and gentle and even and consistent, you're basically getting your finger underneath the string and just kind of popping it, making a bit of a pop sound or a snapping sound. So instead of, and usually it involves kind of muting as well, whether that's with this hand or getting your finger back onto the string. And that technique where you're being maybe a little bit more aggressive and dynamic with your extra fingers kind of ties well into the last thing, which is basically just playing staccato parts of a chord. They can be double stops, they can be any part of the chord. But the idea is this isn't just limited to country, though it is also used in country. Things like this. And basically all I'm doing to create this effect is, after I play those extra notes, I'm just returning my fingers to where they were before. So they're picking the strings and they're going right back down, and that's essentially muting the strings completely so nothing else rings out. So you get kind of a staccato effect, right? And I'm also releasing some tension on these fingers as well, so it's kind of a combination. And in a more country application, you'd get something more like this. Okay, so as far as working on this technique goes, one thing that I'd really recommend is starting it as early on as you can. Once you've got your basic picking technique down and you've got your strumming down, I'd really encourage you to try starting to incorporate even just that first finger into a few things. This is something that's going to take time to develop. There's a lot of muscle memory involved, but it's one of those things that really pays off down the road. And what you'll notice is that all of a sudden when you're playing things, your hand is going to naturally find the most efficient way to play it. So something that some players might alternate pick and string skip to play, well, now all of a sudden you've got this hybrid picking thing and you'll notice, hey, it's a lot easier if I just hybrid pick this part. And yeah, maybe it sounds a little bit different, but again, it's all about efficiency, and hybrid picking really is one of the most efficient forms of picking. So again, starting early is super important. And if this is something that you're already working on, then I challenge you to work on some of the other things I talked about. So playing those piano-like chords, or playing the rolling arpeggios where you play all the notes kind of in order and going back and forth, or even trying some of the country stuff where instead of just playing softly with your fingers, you're trying to kind of pop a little bit. Obviously, don't pull your string out of your guitar, but just giving it a little bit more power and just seeing how you can incorporate that, even if you're not a country player, into some other types of genres and your own playing style. So that's all I wanted to cover in this video. There are obviously a whole bunch of other applications of hybrid picking. This kind of serves as a general introduction to all the different ways you can use it. I'd like to hear from you. If you are already using hybrid picking in your playing, let me know how you are using it. And if you aren't, I'd love to know how you plan on using it. What are you going to work on incorporating it into in your own playing to kind of start developing your own style? Make sure you leave your answers down below in the comments, and I really look forward to reading them. With that said, if you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and please also consider subscribing to the channel here on YouTube. I release a new guitar video every single week. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.